Lorwyn is a plane of endless midsummer. No nightfall, no winter, just constant warmth and bloom. Inspired by Celtic and Gaelic mythology, its world feels dreamlike and rooted in old bedtime tales. The art style evokes storybooks. Even the basic lands are murals, tiny visual poems. Yet the whimsical art hides tension. There might not be true evil, but there are long-standing feuds and certainly many big magical egos. For example, Necksnap depicts brutal violence, and Hearthcage Giant shows us a giant who has imprisoned a pair of flamekin and is now using them as a lantern. In this sunlit world, charming creatures mask cruelty, and the rustic beauty can sometimes cut like a knife. The set symbol, a leaf that resembles a blade, perfectly captures this duality. Worse still, every 300 years, the unending sunshine of Lorwyn flips into the ceaseless night of Shadowmoor, and all of the plane's inhabitants become dark, twisted reflections of their former selves. This idea was born out of structural necessity. Lorwyn began a 4-set experiment in Magic's release schedule, paired first with Morningtide, then followed by its eerie mirror, Shadowmoor/Eventide. Overall, it formed one megablock comprising 2 mini-blocks. Mechanically, the set Lorwyn was a celebration of typal synergy. It was the second tribal-themed block after Onslaught, but it took that concept even further. Most notably, Lorwyn introduced the tribal card type, now renamed Kindred. This odd type, which looks more like a super type at first glance, allows non-creature cards like instants and sorceries to have creature types. This was to allow even more typal synergy than Onslaught had offered. Also, unlike Onslaught, most tribes in Lorwyn occupied 2 colors, facilitating more deck-building diversity. In green-white, there were the Kithkin. The creature type Kithkin had actually appeared all the way back in Legends, but Lorwyn fleshed them out into an entire culture. In this world, the Kithkin are communal halflings linked by the Thought Weft, an empathic network that binds villagers together. They act with uncanny coordination and live by folk rituals and charm-based superstitions. Their central village is called Kinsbale, a beacon of tradition and unity. Elves occupied green-black. These elves were graceful, authoritarian beauty worshippers. In their society, flaws are punished. The ugly are called eye blights, shunned or executed. Among the most morally grey elves in the multiverse, Lorwyn's elves are strictly hierarchical and use poisons like Moonglove to kill those deemed unworthy. Goblins were red-black, and they were known on Lorwyn as boggarts. These goblins were sensation seekers who hoard experiences and live in joyful squalor. Their culture is ruled by aunties like Wart, who interpret chaos into guidance. Merfolk came in blue and white, and were known as the Merrow. These creatures are bureaucratic river folk. They manage waterways and diplomacy through structured societies called schools. Their magic shapes currents and carves secret routes. Wonderwine is their home, a mystical and shifting river whose map only the Merrow can understand. The deeper waters are known as the Dark Meanders, hinting at hidden corruption and secrets within Merrow society. In blue-black were the fairies, insectile tricksters, capricious and cruel. They operate in cliques, steal dreams, and serve, or pretend to serve, Una. Mechanically, they dominated as a flash speed aggro control deck. Glen Elendra is their Twilight Realm, half in and half out of normal space. Tree folk were primarily green and secondarily black and white. Lorwyn's equivalent of Ents, these are sentient trees whose personalities reflect their species. Rowan's are seers, Ashes are warriors. Ancient and protective, the lore of the tree folk centers around Kolfanor, the oldest among them. The red-white tribe were the giants. These are emotional titans who live in dreams and feud loudly. They experience name sleep, vision quests that define their identity. Some are brash, others are reflective. Elementals appeared in two kinds. First, there were the mono-red Flamekin. They are wandering fire spirits following the path of flame, a journey of purpose and meaning. They are humanoids sculpted from ember and ash. The Flamekin are distrusted by others, especially elves and, understandably, tree folk. Then, in all 5 colors, there are the greater elementals. These are abstract beings representing concepts more than elements. Their surreal forms, including fusions of various animals, mark them as living metaphors, not monsters. Finally, also in every color, there were the changelings. These were shapeshifters who echo everything and belong nowhere. They imitate others crudely, acting as neutral tribal glue and reflecting Lorwyn's layered identities. From a gameplay perspective, the changelings ensured that synergies functioned more smoothly across the set. Among the most interesting changelings isn't a creature at all, but the instant nameless inversion, which functions as both a pump spell and a removal spell against small creatures. Having all creature types gives it nifty synergy with tribal recursion. Each of these tribes had its own aesthetic, social structures, and ideology. Onslaught made tribal a strategy. Lorwyn made it philosophy. Rich visual world building reinforced this cohesion. Lorwyn's tribal structure also came through in tight, role-focused cycles. Each tribe had a rare that championed a smaller creature of its type. These included Mistbind Click, Nova Chaser, and Ren's Run Packmaster. Narratively rich, mechanically risky. Champion required you to exile another creature temporarily, representing generational succession. The mechanic required a big investment, but enabled tricks and combos, especially in blink decks. This effect was meant to represent evolution, one creature changing into another, though this didn't really come through in the final execution. The Harbingers were uncommon tutors that placed a creature of their tribe on top of your deck, vital for curving and tempo. Standouts include Treefolk Harbinger, which also fetches forests, and Flamekin Harbinger, still a crucial card in many elemental decks. Next, there were the Revealers. Low mana value creatures like Goldmeadow Stalwart and Ren's Run Vanquisher rewarded you for revealing a same tribe card. These creatures were efficient and format shaping. Silvergill Adept in particular remains a modern merfolk staple. Each tribe also got a cantrip, including cheap spells like Pepper Smoke for fairies and Root Grapple for treefolk. Naturally, there were cycles of tribal lords. Rare lords like Scion of Una and Timber Protector were defining pieces in tribal builds, though the uncommons like Wizened Sen, Imperious Perfect, and Mero Regery probably saw the most standard play. Each tribe had a multicolored rare legend too, from Gadok Teague to Wart Bogart Auntie. Some became commander staples. In addition to the purely tribal mechanics, there was Evoke, perhaps the most inventive keyword in the set. Evoke let you cast creatures with ETB effects like spells. Cheaper, but they died immediately. Cards like Shriekmoor and Muldrifter became competitive all-stars, doubling as efficient removal and card draw respectively. Interestingly, 3 of the Evoke elementals actually started out with different art, but the artworks were swapped around. The art originally intended for Shriekmoor ended up on Ingot Chewer. The art originally intended for Ingot Chewer ended up on Aether Snipe, and the art originally intended for Aether Snipe ended up on Shriekmoor. The result is that Shriekmoor has some of the most intriguing and beautiful artwork for any murderous black creature in the game. In addition, Lorwyn included several elegant, well-structured, non-tribal cycles that blended flavor with gameplay. While making sets, R&D often consciously tries to include cards for players who might not like the set's main themes. For people who weren't into tribal creature decks, they decided to craft a cycle of very strong instants and sorceries. Intended to be charms on steroids, each of the commands offered 4 modes and allowed the controller to choose 2. They quickly became iconic. Cryptic dominated control decks. Austere became a white board wipe staple. Profane enabled lethal combos, and Primal is still probably underrated in EDH. Next were the hideaway lands. Rare lands like Windbrisk Heights, Shelldock Isle, etc. that let you stash a card and play it later for free, rewarding patience and careful deck building. You also had the elemental incarnations. Purity, Guile, Dread, Hostility, and Vigor were mythic-feeling rares tied to each color. Each embodied a feeling, harking back to the incarnations from Judgment, and laying the groundwork for Modern Horizons 2's Evoke elementals. Guile and Vigor saw the most play, especially in Commander, but all became casual favorites thanks to large bodies and strange abilities. In terms of color fixing, the Vivid lands entered tapped with 2 charge counters, enabling 5-color decks. These were clever, subtle designs that saw a ton of play. Yet far and away the most important cycle in Lorwyn was the Planeswalkers. The card type debuted here. Originally planned for Future Sight, the Planeswalkers were delayed to Lorwyn due to design issues. These Lorwyn 5 went on to define Magic's narrative direction. Ajani, Jace, Liliana, Chandra, and Garruk were story-driving characters, helping shift the game's branding toward personality and serialized arcs. Though the Planeswalkers cast a long shadow, many other cards also made a splash in Standard and left a lasting legacy in Eternal formats. First up is Thoughtseize, the premier 1-mana discard spell. Versatile, brutal, and format warping. Doran the Siege Tower created a new archetype, power via toughness. Ponder is deceptively strong, offering streamlined card selection, banned in Modern. Springleaf Drum remains a pauper and Modern staple for mana fixing in creature decks. Spellstutter Sprite helped fairies become a defining aggro control archetype, and it still shows up in Pauper. The rare tribal jewel lands like Auntie's Hovel and Giltleaf Palace enter untapped if you reveal a creature of the appropriate type from your hand. The drawback here is mostly on the deck building level, forcing you to include a significant number of these creatures in your list. Revealing information to your opponent of what's in your hand is also an interesting cost. R&D believed that newer players would feel that this was barely a drawback at all, as they tend to underappreciate the value of information in games. Oblivion Ring ranks among the most influential designs in Magic. The idea of permanence that exiled a card on ETB until they left the battlefield first appeared on the Black Nightmare creatures in Torment. However, R&D decided the effect made more sense in White. Oblivion Ring went down well, and its design space has since been replicated and iterated on across countless White cards. On the surface, Forced Fruition appears generous, making your opponent draw 7 cards for each spell they cast. But it's a death trap in Nekusar or Xyrus decks. Thousand Year Elixir enables instant tap abilities and untaps creatures, popular in EDH for combo decks like Selvala or Vannifar. Dolmen Gate protects your attackers from combat damage, making it a gem in EDH and the most expensive card from Lorwyn. From a story perspective, the most fascinating thing about the block is that Lorwyn's light eventually gives way to Shadowmoor, its dark twin, transformed by the Great Aurora. The plane shifts into a realm of dusk and paranoia. Idyllic meadows turn to bleak moors. Joyful goblins become raiders. Communal kithkin become xenophobes. Only the Fae remain unchanged. This inversion was mechanical as well as thematic. +1/+1 counters became -1/-1 counters. Tapping turned to untapping. Race matters shifted to color matters. But I'll cover all this more deeply in a later video. The aesthetics conveyed this change too. Lorwyn's art was lush and active. Shadowmoor's is muted, lonely, and still. That contrast created an emotional gut punch. In other words, Shadowmoor made Lorwyn's warmth more precious through its destruction. Eventually, Lorwyn and Shadowmoor merged, cycling every 12 hours. Characters retained both personalities, a cool new direction for the setting. Early next year, we will return to this fused version of Lorwyn with the set Lorwyn Eclipsed. Kamigawa Neon Dynasty proved that a troubled plane can be revived with modern tools. For instance, Lorwyn's day-night duality could now be captured through modal cards and double-faced designs. Also part of why many players seem to love Lorwyn is because the narrative focused on internal stakes, native cultures, and personal arcs rather than multiversal drama. Lorwyn's story stood out because it was grounded, local, and character-driven. With no planeswalkers in the novels, the narrative centered on tribal tensions, personal journeys, and cultural conflicts. No cosmic crises, no deus ex machina. It was a self-contained epic, with layered perspectives and meaningful consequences. Crucially, Lorwyn interprets folklore through abstraction. This is in marked contrast to the plane's thematic cousin Eldraine, which leans on direct fairy tale references. For example, the card Clackbridge Troll explicitly mirrors the tale of the Three Billy Goats Gruff. The less direct, more interpretive approach makes Lorwyn feel like a living place rather than a collection of references. Thus far, we've mostly looked at the positives, but despite its rich lore and aesthetic, Lorwyn had a few major gameplay drawbacks. Champion was flavorful, but added complex board state tracking. Clash was also underwhelming. This was the mechanic where each player revealed the top card of their library, and the player with the highest mana value card received a bonus. This introduced randomness that punished low-curve decks. Finally, the tribal card type added mechanical bloat. In fact, tribal was soon retired after this block, although there are hints of it one day making a comeback. The overall result was cluttered gameplay, especially in Limited, and a steep learning curve that overwhelmed casual players. These issues helped trigger Magic's New World Order, a design philosophy focused on reducing cognitive load and board complexity. For all these reasons, Lorwyn was the lowest selling large set in Magic history at the time. Players were divided on its aesthetic, and its intricacy proved off-putting. Yet time has been kind. Its cohesive world building and bold mechanics have made it a cult favorite. In the end, Lorwyn is undeniably one of Magic's most imaginative sets. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and consider joining my Patreon, and I'll see you in the next video.